by our contract to turn up on once again on a holiday, which will be off doing any other interesting, exciting things. Good morning. Thank you for coming. Yesterday we started by asking you where you thought your mind was. Today I want to start with a question to each of you in turn, which was one of my first surprises when I first came to Hokkaido 19 years ago, which was to go to a school of 13, 14-year-old children.
No, 10 or 11.
10 or 11.
Mm.
Sure.
And I asked them a number of questions. And then I asked them what their religion was. And I'll tell you their answer after I've asked you what your answer is. So I want each of you to tell me what your religion is.
Your religion?
Yeah. Well, for a change, we'll go around this way, so you've got a little more longer to think about what your religion is. Yes.
I have no religion.
No religion. Okay.
No religion.
No religion.
Also, no religion.
You all are very clear that you know what religion is, but you don't have it. Okay.
I was brought up as a Protestant, so I went to a church school. Yeah, I'm not very strict about it.
Yeah.
I was not very strict, but Orthodox or Christianity.
Orthodox? Russian Orthodox?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would follow my parents' religion, for example, funeral. But talking about myself, yes, Buddhism. But talking about myself, I would say no religion. I don't have religion.
You don't have religion. Hello.
Yes, atheist.
You're Catholic.
Atheist.
Atheist. Right. What's the difference between an atheist and having no religion? These people have all said no religion. You say you are an atheist. Do you think that is different, or is it just the same as saying no religion?
I think it's almost the same.
Okay.
I don't think it's the same.
I believe Buddhism and Shinto.
Buddhist and Shinto.
Shinto.
And Buddhist.
And Buddhist.
Buddhist.
Yes. Both. I believe.
You believe?
Yeah.
All right.
I don't have any religion.
No religion.
No religion.
I'm mostly Catholic, but I'm not religion.
No religion.
No religion. We haven't got many religious people here. And there was someone who just came in.
Yes.
What is your religion?
I have no religion.
No religion.
Yeah.
Okay. But you all, when you say you have no religion, you all seem to be quite clear that you know what religion is in order to say that you don't have it. Just take just a couple of people here. If you know that you don't have it, what do you think it is that you don't have? What would it be if you did have it? Can anyone define at all what religion is? What is the Japanese word for religion?
Shukyo.
And what does that, how would you translate that into English?
religion.
If you decode the kanji, perhaps it means the teaching of the forefathers, or the teaching of the forefathers, something of that sort.
Is the religion for you? Is the religion for you?
No. For me, I mean, I have a very different view.
Can you write the same word?
It's the same word. It's the same
word in Chinese.
Yes.
It's the teaching, and it's your ancestors.
Yeah. Ancestral teaching, something of that sort.
Ancestral teaching. Does it imply they're teaching about anything in particular? Could be they're teaching about how to eat your food, or?
For the Japanese, I think it's very different. For someone in the Taiwanese tradition, which you know well, is very heavily influenced by the Chinese culture.
Yes.
So yours is the teaching of ancestral religion.
I was going to say, I have no particular religion, but I do practice, to a certain degree, ancestral worshipping, which is quite common in our culture. That came from mainland China.
So what about, what is religion? Any of you are going to be brave enough to tell me what you think religion is? What does it do?
You heard, please.
I believe with it because I do the Zen.
Oh, you do the thing.
Yes.
Practice.
Practice.
Meditation.
Yeah.
Zazen means meditation.
Meditation.
Buddhist meditation.
It's the best way to control my mind.
But do you worship the Buddha?
When you visit the temple.
Or do the thing.
Do you think the Buddha is a god?
No, I
You don't.
don't think. But so Buddha is Buddha. I expected Buddha, but not so.
You respect him, but you don't worship him.
Really, yes.
Okay, so what happened when I went to this school? 10, 11-year-olds. You went to a school in England and you said, what is your religion? Now already our children have been taught something about religion, so they would all say, we are Christians or something like that. And they could probably explain a little bit, you go to church, you believe in God, you do this, that, and the other. These children looked at me, and there was Professor Nakamura was there, and another teacher to translate this, and they said, we don't know what you mean. We have never heard of anything. What is it? And I said, well, have you heard of the Buddha, or Confucius, or Jesus Christ, or... No religion. So if you think of that diagram I drew yesterday, where we break our lives into religion, politics, social life, and economic life like that. The little Japanese children I first met astonished me, because they said there is no religion. Or again, another sign that there is something odd about Japan, very odd, and this is the heart of all the things we have been discussing, is that if you look at the way in which societies are organized in all the civilizations, this is meant to be a map of the world, by the way, just in case I start with England here, and Japan is here, and India, China, Africa, and so on. If you look at the whole of this area here, which is sometimes called Eurasia, though this is not so true of China, but certainly across here and including India. All these societies are divided into 4 groups or functions. The rulers, Kshatriya in India, or the nobility, or the kings, or the whatever. So a ruling political group, a priest group, the Brahmins in India, or the churches in Europe. The priests, the rulers, the priests, the traders, townsmen, merchants group, what we call bourgeois. They live in cities, in burgs or towns. In French, this is the nobilité, clergymen, bourgeois, and paysans, the peasants, the people who work in the countryside. Those are the 4 castes in India. In other words, using other terms, and it's the 4 castes in Europe. If you look at Japan, you'll have 4 groups. You have the samurai daimyo ruler group, which is equivalent to that. You have the equivalent, strangely, and this is a very odd feature of Japanese culture, the peasants, the workers, the country folk, peasants, are the next highest group, which has elevated them a lot. Then you have the merchants and makers of things, and then you have the traders and people who sell and exchange things.
Isn't it craftsmen rather than merchants?
Craftsmen.
And then merchants at the bottom.
Yeah. Craftsmen, merchants, yeah. So craftsmen here. Now if you look at that, there's something missing. I hope one can spot what is missing there. Same in China. Where are they? They are so important in the West and in India and in the Middle East, obviously Islam, the mullahs and so on. But they aren't in the social structure of Japan or in China. So it looks as if there is a significant absence of one of the most important features of the rest of this part of the world. So we'll come back to that and how it happened and the implications in a minute. Does everyone understand that so far? Okay. In fact, there are 3 religious systems in the higher civilizations, that is, civilizations with written languages, cities, crafts, and so on, what we call civilization, as opposed to small tribal groups. There is one here. The line goes more like that. In this area, there are monotheistic religions, the 3 monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which believe in one God. So these are the monotheisms with one God. In this area here, the whole of this area is the second system, which is religious systems which believe in many gods. Although Buddhism is difficult because in theory there is no God, but in practice most people believe in many bodhisattvas and many gods, God means smaller gods. So these are polytheistic. Theist means God, and so they are many. Poly means many. Mono means one. So these are monotheistic, these are polytheistic. And then there's Japan. And Japan is totally different from the gap between Japan and the Japanese Sea and the mainland. It's one of the biggest gaps, cultural gaps, probably the biggest cultural gap in the world. Because Japan has, as we'll see, no religion, which dominates all these other systems. So these are very different, monotheism and polytheism, but they are all part of one order, kind of world, as I'll explain later. And Japan is not part of that world. Until you understand this, you won't understand your very strange civilization that you live in. Now, let's start. I'll start with the world I grew up in, like Jonathan. I was brought up in England as a Protestant, and I was therefore someone who was living in a very small island which had converted to Christianity. The formal date for this was 664 after the birth of Christ AD, the Synod of Whitby. This is about 1500 years ago. England became Christian. The result of this has been to shape almost everything about the world I live in, every part of my life. My morality, my aesthetics, my politics, everything is influenced by religion. Religion is everywhere. I didn't really realize how strongly this was the case until we were visited on a number of occasions by Professor Nakamura. Because I thought, like some of you, that I had been brought up religious, that I no longer believed in this, and therefore I had no religion. And if you'd asked me, I would have said, I have no religion. I'm an agnostic. I say I don't know. I'm not sure there is no God. I can't prove there is no God, but I can't prove there is one, so I'm agnostic. Sarah is usually more confident and says, I am an atheist. I know there is no God. But we thought we had escaped from religion. But our friends here, coming from Japan, said, you are so religious, Alan. And I said, no, I'm not. I don't believe in any of this nonsense. And then they pointed out that, in fact, religion is the bedrock of almost everything I do. When I read English poetry, it is always filled with religion. When I explain things, there is always a religious element. When I consider what the purpose of my life is, there is always a religious element. When I consider what is good and bad behavior, morality, there is very strong religion. My attitude towards sex, towards people, everything is suffused with religion. It is all around me, and yet it is invisible to me because I live within a Christian civilization which has left its mark on everything. This is particularly the case, obviously, being in a place like Cambridge, because it is all the time. The church bells are ringing and the services are going on, and it's like being in a Japanese city. It's like being in Sapporo. The Mikoshi are always there, and there's the Shinto shrines and so on. All around me are the symbols of religion in Cambridge. But I thought that was just the surface, and I got rid of it. But in fact, everything from our metaphysics, as our philosophical systems, to our legal systems, to our art, much of our art is religious. So we are in the position of someone who once was asked whether they were religious, and they said, "No, thank God I'm not religious." we can't actually do they understand?
大丈夫。危ない。大丈夫。その宗教はないっていう答え方っていうのは、その神がいるともいないともわからない。だから、よく信仰してないから自分には宗教がないというアセイストっていうのははっきりないと自分の中で確信している神がいないと。だからあなたは確信しているいう方で、それは全然違う。で、先生そのノーブルでサラさんはその汗自分はないと思ってる。ただし来てみた。で我々はないと言ってるくせにすごくなぜこんなに自分たちと違うのか、それはパッと見るとやっぱりものすごく影響を受けてるんじゃないかないか。我々がノットリリジャスと言ったりアセイストと言ったりする時とまるっきり違う。でそれで、彼ら2人はあるいは彼らはその、自分たちはないと言いながらすごい大きな土台の上に乗っかっているということが分かったの初めて分かった。こいつとまるで違う。でこの絵っていうのはその、大なり小なり土台に同じ神様の土台に乗っているところ、一人の土台に乗っているところたくさんの、まあ、少し違うんだろうけど乗っているところまるっきりないところ来た言うんで初めてガーンと来たというふうにそういう。
Okay. So, what is religion? If you ask me, you found it very difficult to define what you thought religion was, which I hope we'll have a chance to talk, so we'll sandwich at lunch, to find out why you found it so difficult to say what you thought religion was. Whether it's the problem of language or English, or because you have no idea, which I suspect it may be the case that you have no idea what religion is, you just know you don't have it. But what is religion for us? We are very clear what religion is for us. It's three things. Religion, the first thing religion is a philosophical system explaining the way the world is. So it's a system of philosophy. Or metaphysics. It explains how the world began. God created the world. It explains where the world is going, the final reckoning when God will wind up this experiment and judge us all, the end of the world. It explains the laws upon which the world works, why all things happen, the relations between animals and human beings, why the sun rises, why it falls. Everything is explained by religion. Nothing happens in this world without God's permission. He sees everything, He is omniscient, He knows everything. So all the laws and rules of life and the meaning and purpose of life is explained by God. Everything was ordained at the beginning when He created the world. Everything was laid out and it just follows His plan. It explains why suffering occurs, why we are miserable and unhappy at times, and how to overcome this. Why some people are successful, why some people fail. Everything is explained by religion. So it gives us answers to all the large questions, and this is what I think Professor Nakamura saw in the way that Sarah and I talked about the world, that we were constantly, as they put it once, whenever you have a philosophical problem, you always solve it by this magical card, like in a game. You have the magical card. When you can't solve a problem, in the end you say, it is God. This, of course, is the magical card that Descartes used in his philosophical system. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. But why do I think? Because God gave me this ability. Descartes starts with God. Newton starts with God. All our scientists and philosophers start with God. Einstein, as we were reminded when he was asked whether he was religious, he said, well, I don't believe in a particular God or gods, but I believe that there is a wider power out there which causes me wonder and amazement, and I can't understand. So all our scientists, philosophers and so on, in the end, are left with God. So
they have a question.
Okay.
言ってみようか。
Do we understand?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
So if you ask any question of a deep philosophical kind, you'll come back to religion in the end. About the meaning of life.
何かを説明しなければならないときに、その答えを必ずくれる説明体系で、なぜか科学的に答えられるものはある。どうして、宇宙が太陽系が
The magic card
Yes.
Is used in two ways, basically two ways. One is with the consciousness that I am using this card and I believe in this. Another one is just by way of a social convention. I'll give you an example. If you ask somebody, you know something or not, the person says, well, I don't know. Then we can say that the person is making a judgment about his or her mental state. So this I don't know as a magic card indicates a kind of meta cognitive activity, a judgment to be made. But if you ask a two-year-old infant child, you know where your mother is? I don't know. You ask a child anything. Many children, not all, will say I don't know. But in this case, a two-year-old are not sure, or he or she is not conscious of his using this I don't know, which in the case of an adult, in our previous example, is an indication of a meta-cognitive process, or the result of that. But a two-year-old doesn't have that. He just, he learns it from the adult. You know, when he's not interested, he said, I don't know. And I think this situation can be applied to the question of what your religion is, or to your case, when you said consciously you don't think you have any religion, but actually in your behavior, when observed by others, they are all deeply religion-based. So is a consciousness or intentional intention necessary? When you say, what is religion? And somebody said, I have religion or I don't. Do we not have to ask further, are you, do you know what you mean? That is, you are, because I think as in our everyday life, we have something that we learned from the cultural convention. But that doesn't mean that we are conscious of the system and we take this system or part of it into us. We are just imitating.
Yes, well, I think that's a useful distinction. And I think in a lot of cases people are just, without thinking, just saying, I don't know, like children. And you have to ask that question and press them, and you can see whether it's conscious or not. While you were talking, it reminded me of, I had a deep dislike for the American Vice President, Rumsfeld.
It's a defense.
Defense. Vice President.
Defense Secretary, but he came out once with something he probably got from some Zen philosophy or something, but it was rather nice. He says, there are things I know, there are some things I know I don't know, and there are some things I don't know that I don't know. And that struck me as, and I think to a certain extent, those last two are like, there are some things you know you don't know, and there are other things you don't know that you don't know, but you sort of retreat. Anyway, we'll just go on, perhaps come back to that. So we have a philosophical system called religion. Then we also use religion to tell us how to behave. We had a distinction before between ethics and morality. Religion gives us our moral system and also our ethical system. It both tells us how to socially interact with other people, but also deep inside us how to behave in a right and proper way, which we call morality. So we have a Christian ethics and we have a Christian morality, and I'll concentrate on morality because this is the thing that seems to be totally missing in Japan. I led Ruth Benedict into her mistakes, I think, about sharing and so on, but she was sort of touching on something important there. God told us that he was very helpful because he told Jesus 10 points, 10 commandments.
Moses.
Sorry? This is what to believe. Philosophy is what to believe. And we are in the Protestant Anglican Church, we have 36 articles, I think it is. And it says, you must believe this. If you are a Christian, Anglican Christian, you must believe these 36 articles. In Jonathan and my universities, before you could become a full member of those universities, you had to read through these 36 articles which said, I believe in God Almighty, the creator of the world. I believe that Jesus Christ was his son, and so on and so on. And you have these 36 articles of belief, and you have to subscribe to them. You have to, this is the contract, so to speak, when you join Oxford or Cambridge.
Or had. It's no longer the case now.
No, it was. So these are the articles of belief. The articles of morality are the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, and so on. Mostly not, but some sort of, you shall love your neighbour as, or whoever it is, as yourself. So there's some positive ones. And these are the foundation of the moral system. Because God has told us that we must be good, morally good. If we are not good, and here is the battle that we talked about between the body and the soul or the heart or the head really. This battle must be won. Because if you don't win it, you will go to hell. Human beings are here on this earth. Up here is, or down there actually, because we envisage it downwards. Down there is hell, and up there is heaven. We talked about heaven as being a rather vague place, but hell is quite specific. It's Guantanamo Bay, or Abu Ghraib. The Americans, being very religious people, replicated hell in their penal systems.
わかった。天国はものすごく曖昧なものだというので、エンジェルの話した時にぼんやりしてる。で、ヘルっていう方はものすごく具体的で、こうやってこうやってこうやってこうやってこうやって。
All the tortures, you are burnt, your fingernails are pulled out, everything that Americans have developed, and not just Americans, I should say, the British and everyone else have developed as forms of torture, are practiced down in hell. So it's very sensible to spend your life trying to avoid to ending up in Guantanamo, and instead going to Sapporo, which is heaven. Beautiful trees, and nice people, and good food, and generally heavenly existence. So your morality is underpinned by fear and hope, and also a feeling of obligation and thanks to God. So you try to be a good person. Now the difference, one of the great differences is, of course, who is judging this and how do they know? It's very fashionable in anthropology and sociology to talk about something which Foucault talks about, the panopticon, which is a kind of prison system that was developed by Jeremy Bentham, where the warder, the person in charge of the prison, lives here, and all the prisoners are around here, and he has lots of little spy holes. It's rather like the system that's now widespread in Britain, particularly, where you have cameras everywhere. It's based on the same idea. You don't know whether anyone is looking through these cameras or watching. I mean, in most cases they aren't. But you know that they could potentially be watching you. So the prisoners all around here don't know whether the warder is asleep or looking out and seeing what they're doing. So that's a panopticon, and that's a surveillance society which Foucault talks about.
監視社会。
So this is the system we have. God is there. And not only, he's much better than these closed circuit television or surveillance things, because God is so powerful that he's awake all the time. He's watching all the screens. He never sleeps. So, as it says in the Bible, he knows when a hair falls out of my head. There are not many left, but the ones that are left, he can watch every one drop. When a sparrow falls from the sky or loses a feather, God knows. So you may, in Japan you can go off and do awful things, and you may have a conscience about it, you possibly do, but no one else knows about them. With us, God knows every single thing, and he's keeping, of course, to decide whether you're going down to Guantanamo or up to Sapporo. He's keeping a log. Every time you do something bad, like at school, he gives you a bad mark. When you do a good thing, he gives you a good mark. At the end, when you go to the gates or the judgment chamber, and St. Peter is there, and he says, "Sorry, McFarlane." We were discussing this, you see, because Sarah is a very good person, so he's going to say, "Oh, Sarah-san, yes, very good." And I just imagine the moment when I'm saying, "Bye."
She's atheist, so she's not supposed to
So, religion for us is morality and belief. And then, so religion deals with what we call dogma, that is things you must believe. Eschatology, which means what is going to happen to you after you die. So it is underlying our sense of progress, of time, of what is right and what is wrong. All that, the relation between how we should treat animals, how we should treat the natural world, concepts of the body, of sex, of family relations, of truth, of lying. Almost all ideas in justification come from our religious system. And it has a third function, which is what we call ritual, which is how you should behave in relation to God. Your religious practices, how in particular you should communicate with God. Because obviously you want God to be kind to you, to give you good health and good fortune and all these sorts of things, and protect your family. And you do that by what I defined religion as before, repetitive, standardized, formalized behavior. So you clap your hands, or you go like that, and you say certain forms of words, and you go and drink the precious blood of Christ in the, and so on and so on. All these rituals are based on what we've been told about how to approach God. So, putting it together, religion is a threefold system.
Well, また最後のリチュアルがアピア。そうですね。
You are just doing that.
Yes.
We would call that magic. So religion is a joint system of ideas and beliefs, of ethics and morality, and of rituals. Within Christian religion, English religion has historically been at one extreme end. In certain respects. One is that it is a very individualistic religion, particularly since the 16th century when we became Protestants, so that we don't really emphasize that we need anyone else except ourselves to communicate with God. God is within us and we pray to Him. So you don't really have to go to have a priest or go to a church. God is eternally with you and He is watching you. So you can have a direct telephone line between you and God. We all carry mobile phones around with us with God's telephone number, or and so we can send Him text messages and He sends us text messages all the time as individuals. If you were in Catholic culture, you could do a bit of that, but you also have to go to some official. More like in Japan, you have to go to some official who will then go to another official, who will then go to another official, who will then go to God, or some higher power, but you don't have a God. And then things will come down again. That's like the Catholic system. So that's one feature. It's very individualistic, and it's also partly related to that, rather tolerant, because each of us thinks that other people can have their own opinions. Queen Elizabeth, the first Queen Elizabeth, after the Reformation, famously said, when the church people around her were saying, well, you should check up on the religious beliefs and behaviour of your population, your subjects. She said something famously like, I believe that I should not spy into people's souls. What they believe in down inside them is their business, not mine. As long as they behave outwardly, that is okay, and it's between them and God. So, what you believe privately is up to you, to a much larger extent than in many Christian societies. And this is something which I've observed a lot in a place like Cambridge, because although it has been, in an outward sense, a very Christian place, there are lots of churches and we have lots of services, and you have to agree in the past to the beliefs. In practice, what you believe is up to you. If you want privately to think this is all nonsense, if you want to believe in that the world is ruled by little green men coming down from Mars who secretly rule the world, that is up to you. In Cambridge, always, how you behave is more important than what you believe. So, if you are a very devout, believing sort of person, but you eat your food very badly, that is a far worse sin. So as long as you are a nice person, you eat your food well, you talk in the right accent, then that's fine. And indeed, the English have always had something of a suspicion. You find it in many of our novelists and in playwrights, in Shakespeare, in Oscar Wilde, and so on. They're always kind of being critical of clergymen and of too much faith. George Bernard Shaw, Three Plays for Puritans, is a very good example of this sort of attack over too much religious enthusiasm makes us worried. You should not try and force your beliefs on other people. They have a right to think what they like to think. Whereas in many societies, it's much more what we call evangelical, much more full of zeal. So those are the two features, individualism in religion and tolerance to a large extent.
Yeah. その宗教の中で、2種類分けよう。で、
Last feature is that we have, there was a German poet, I think Schiller, who talked, my German is no good, so I won't give you the German word for it, but when translated, it means disenchantment. Enchantment means a magic spell holds you. Disenchantment means that the magical spell has been pushed away. Miyazaki, takes his children and adventures into a magical world of enchantment, and then come out into the ordinary world. Well, Max Weber, the sociologist, talked about the disenchantment of the world. That means that the magical, strange, miraculous world is pushed away. And in the form of religion which we have in England, this has happened to a very large extent. The English and the German and others who became reformers, the Reformation, the Catholics believe in a world of magic, where, for example, God can come down and change ordinary wine into blood, or create miracles, or interfere with this natural world. It is still enchanted to a certain extent. The Protestants said this is all nonsense. This world is this world. God's world is that world. You may have communication with him, but he doesn't interfere. He never... Miracles are over. There is no... God's finger and hand doesn't come down into this world at all. So God is right up here, and we are right down here. And there's a huge gap. He doesn't come down into this world. He is watching us. We can talk to him. but he is at a great distance, and also inside our heart at the same time, but he doesn't interfere with this world. Now, that's the last feature, the disenchantment, extreme disenchantment of our world. Do you need to explain that? Yes. The last thing I want to tell you about is something that is at the end of my book on Japan, and was finally the explanation for this fact that Japan is totally different from all these religious systems. And this is something which is hardly known now, even in the West. It's forgotten. There was a great thinker, one of the greatest social thinkers and philosophers of the 20th century, who called Karl Jaspers. He was a junior friend of Max Weber, the only person Max Weber felt was on the same sort of level as himself. And he studied philosophical systems around the world. He spoke most of the languages of the world. He studied Indian philosophy, Chinese philosophy, as well as Western philosophy, and he was Jewish, and he knew a great deal about Jewish tradition. Hitler didn't like him and threw him into a concentration camp. When he came out after that experience, he didn't die. He summarized all his works and all Weber's work into one very, very short book, about 100 pages, called The Origins and Goal of History. And in the first chapter of that, in the first 5 pages, he summarized all the world history, and in particular the great transformation that altered our world. 3,000 years ago on this planet, all the peoples on this earth believed in enchantment. That is to say, here you are, living in your village. Let's take the case where Sarah and I work in the Himalayas. Here's the mountains behind you, and the fields around you, and rocks and trees, and so on. That's the world you're living in. It's a world of physical things, material things you can touch and see, like a rock or a tree or a mountain or other human beings. But it is also a magical world, a spiritual world, filled with forces which you don't understand, kami-like forces. So everything has a double. You have the pen, but you also have the spirit inside the pen. Like Japanese believe Toshiba laptops have kami inside them, or spirit inside them. No. So on. You may not know that, but I'm told. So, in the area where I work in the Himalayas, it's slightly less so, but it's still largely an enchanted world. You go up to a rock, and it's not just a rock, it has a little god in it. You go to a tree and you tie something around it because it has some sort of spirit. The land of the dead is not out there, it's just in some different dimension. It's just over the mountains over here. And it's just like this world, except without the pain and suffering. So all the time the shamans can bring down the spirits, and there are spirits all around you, swirling all around you. And as Professor Nakamura says, your own spirit can escape from your body and go and harm someone in the night and then come back, and so on and so on. So human spirits are very fragile, and if a child is sick, you have to make sure that their spirit doesn't escape from them and go somewhere else. You tie strings around their neck and so on to stop that. So this is an enchanted world where there is no separation, absolute separation between what we now call the supernatural and the natural, between matter and spirit. And this is how all the world was 3,000 years ago. Every society, China, India, they were all enchanted worlds. Then, according to Jaspers, for some amazing reason which no one understands, sometime between 800 years before the birth of Christ, and about 200 years before the birth of Christ, in other words, about 2,500 years ago, roughly, in that 600-year period, all over here, philosophical systems developed which started to break this enchantment, which began to suggest that instead of an integrated world where humans and spirits and so on were all mixed up like that, the world was in fact, there was this world we live on, which is material and physical and all the objects and so on. And there was another supernatural, above nature, outside us, an ideal world, heaven, if you like, which was entirely separate. There was a big gap. You might go there after death, but it existed differently from you, from us, and provided an ideal model of how life should be, against which we measured this life. So you've got, as Jaspers explains, a tension, a contradiction between the ideal world of heaven and the gods and the real. So in a way, putting it in another form, religion became institutionalized. There became something which you could call religion, because religion is here and the ideal is here, and it is separated off. Now, the people who did this did it more or less simultaneously over the whole of this area. Here, in China, Lao Tse and Confucius, and no doubt others, Mencius and so on. So China went through what the metaphor that Jaspers uses is sort of a wheel turning round, and what we call this, when a wheel in English turns round, it turns round on a central axis. It turns on its axis. And so he called this the axial age. That is the age when the world turned on its axis. So the axial age occurred at this time. It separated the material world from the spiritual world and created religion. It occurs in China and whatever, this area with Confucius and Lao Tse. It occurred in India at the same time with Buddha and some of the basic writings of Hinduism, the Upanishads. It occurred in the Middle East, Persia, with Zarathustra or Zoroaster. It occurred in another part of the Middle East with the greatest of the Old Testament Jewish prophets, Elijah, Isaiah, and several other great prophets of the Jewish religion. And it occurred in the Mediterranean, in Greece, with the early Greek philosophers, the pre-Socratic philosophers, and then Socrates, Plato, and so on, who were about this time, about 5th century, 6th century BC, before the birth of Christ. Everywhere, all those places went through this great shift, this axial change to religions in our sense. No one knows why this happened. Jasper doesn't really give an explanation. Some people think it was the horse, the great horse peoples of this area took some religious innovation from Central Asia and spread it this way and spread it that and way and so on. But why they should spread it and why it should emerge, other people think that maybe it's something to do with the communication systems. This is the time, certainly in Greece, when you get the development of new languages. This is the discovery of alphabetic systems which change your relationship with the world. I won't go into that, but it may be something to do with the writing or communication systems which suddenly distance God. One effect of writing things down with alphabetic characters is that it fossilizes them and it separates you from the world. Whatever the reason, it happened. The odd thing, do you want to explain that, or shall I finish off?
Well, axial.
The extraordinary thing is that all the civilizations of the world went through this axial transformation, which affected their philosophies and moralities and everything, but not Japan. Japan has never become an axial civilization. In other words, its basic philosophy, morality, and so on, is still enchanted, back in the age of enchantment. In other words, it's a shamanic, magical world which doesn't separate. This is one of the reasons you'll find it very difficult to define religion, because there is no